In this module, let's configure AWS credentials to enable us run Terraform commands in our pipeline. So previously, if you come to our pipeline, Wonder Prep Terraform pipeline, and then you build the pipeline, previously we have a build failure because we do not have the necessary AWS credentials. So we are going to build it again, and then we see the console output to see what error message we have. So the build status in progress. Let's give it a few minutes for the build to complete. Once the build completes, you will know if the build was successful or not. So the build failed. If you click here, the small drop down as usual, you come to the console output. You'll see why the Jenkins build failed. And if you come to the console output, let's scroll down while we're on the console output. If you scroll down, you'll see Terraform planning failed. Why did the planning fail? We have no valid credential sources or no credential sources found. In our previous module, we configured our Jenkins such that with the help of an IAM role, we deleted the role. With the help of the IAM role, we could effectively log into the Jenkins server. So I logged out of the session. Now, coming back to our pipeline, we do not have any valid credentials. So what we are going to be doing in this module, we'll come to our Jenkins, we'll create credentials for access key and secret access key, and then we'll reference those credentials in our Jenkins pipeline. If you come to the official Jenkins documentation, I'll click here, I'll see Jenkins credentials, and then I'll open the official Jenkins documentation, Jenkins credentials. If you click on Jenkins credentials, the first thing which you will see is using credentials. Now, using credentials basically is that part of the Jenkins pipeline where you can understand how to configure credentials within your pipeline. If you come to Jenkins using credentials, this is the official documentation. You scroll down, they'll say we have different type of credentials: secret text, username and password, secret file, SSH username with private key, certificate, and so on. So these are some kind of credentials which can be stored. So Jenkins can store the following types of credentials. Now, credential security, configuring credentials. If you have to configure a credential, this is the official Jenkins documentation, adding a new global credential. So you click on manage Jenkins, you click on credentials, and then other stored scope for Jenkins on the right, you click on system. So you click on system. Under system, you can click the global credentials unrestricted. If you click the global credential on unrestricted, you now select the particular type of credential. You click here, you'll be able to select a particular type of credential. Now, if you go again to our pipeline, Jenkins pipeline, when you click on Jenkins pipeline here, you can click on pipeline syntax. You will click on pipeline syntax. How do you make use of credentials within your pipeline? So basically, as far as pipeline syntax is concerned, let's scroll down to derivative environment. So if you come to pipeline syntax, for you to use an example of a credential, you can pass that credential under environment sections. You can pass that credential under environment section. I'll give another example. Let's come to using a Jenkins file. Now, when you click on using a Jenkins file, remember we are under pipeline, and then we click on using a Jenkins file. When you click on using a Jenkins file, you'll see how to create a Jenkins file as we've seen in our previous modules. Now, while we are here, we are going to scroll down to build, test, deploy. If you scroll down, you'll see how to use environment variables. Now, the way Jenkins stores credentials is by the use of environment variables, and you can have some certain environment variables which are the default variables: the build ID, the Jenkins URL. These are some default environment variables. But if you are to manage an environment variable like the credentials, if you scroll down, you will see how to store credentials as environment variables. So if you come here, you have secret files. To store a secret file, this is how you can store a secret file in a Jenkins pipeline. You create an environment, and then you give the name of the secret file. For example, this is a Kubernetes config map. You give the name of the environment variable, my config, and then you store it as a credentials within your Jenkins. It's the same thing. If you have to store other kind of credentials, you use the same procedure. You can use with credentials, and then if you have to store, let's go back up to see how you can store user secret text, which is what we'll be doing. If you have to store secret text in your Jenkins as credentials, you need to create a block within your Jenkins pipeline script for environments, where you create environment variables for your access key and for your secret access key. Now, when you create these environment variables for your access key and for your secret access key, you now store the actual value as credentials on your Jenkins server. So this means you have to go to your Jenkins server, you go to manage Jenkins, you click on credential, and then you'll be able to store this credential corresponding to your access key and your secret access key. Now, these are the credentials which Jenkins will be making use of for you to be able to authenticate to your AWS account to perform the build. Now, what we are going to do is we'll copy this block of code. Now, you come back to your Jenkins pipeline. This is our Jenkins pipeline. The pipeline, our previous result failed. So you come back to the Wonder Prep Terraform pipeline, which is on Jenkins. Once you click that pipeline, we are now going to configure this pipeline. So we are going to copy the credentials here. We'll click on copy. We copy the credentials. We come back to our pipeline. We click on configure for us to add this credential block in our pipeline. Now, once you click on configure, you can scroll down within your pipeline. This is where you have been configuring our pipeline. So within the pipeline, before the stages, take note, according to your Jenkins file, everything must be within this pipeline. So within this pipeline, inside your Jenkins, we are going to click below these tools. We configure these tools to install Terraform. But after the tools, you hit enter, and then you paste the file which you copied. Again, we copy the file using from our official Jenkins documentation. So I've copied this block for our environment variables. We copy it. We come to our pipeline. We are under the Wonder Prep Terraform pipeline. Now, once you hit enter, you can backspace and then you paste. So you make sure your cursor is around here, and then you paste. You do right click and you paste. Now, once you paste, you take note below the tools section, we have added environment variables. These environment variables which we've created is the environment AWS access key and the AWS secret access key. All of these fall under the environment, and what we'll be doing is we'll go to our Jenkins, we'll store our access key and secret access key within these credentials. So for us to do that, let's duplicate this tab. For you to duplicate the tab, you right click here and you select duplicate. Once you duplicate the tab, you click on dashboard. Now, while you're on dashboard, you click on manage Jenkins. Once I select manage Jenkins, for me to configure the credentials, I'll click here on credentials to configure the credentials. Once I click on credentials, I already have one credential which we stored, which was a Git credential. This credential was stored for us to be able to do a Git checkout. So with the help of the Jenkins environment variables, will be creating the other credentials for access key and secret access key. So once you're here, you click on global. When you click on global, you will now see an option to add credentials. Now, once you see this option to add credentials, you click on add credentials. The credential which you are going to add, unlike the GitHub username and password, is going to be a secret text. So we'll be adding a secret text. So you click on the drop down and you select secret text. Now, what is most important, the ID of the credential which you're putting must match this ID which you stored on your Jenkins pipeline. So I'm going to copy this ID here. All right, click, I'll copy, come back to these new credentials. I'll paste this for my first credential, which is my AWS secret key. So once I paste that, I'll put the same as the description, and then I'll get my AWS secret key and paste. So I'm going to stop the recording here, get the AWS secret key and paste within this secret. Once I put the first credential, which is my Jenkins AWS secret key, I'll now paste the access key as my first credential. So the access key, I'll put as my first credential. Once I put the access key as my first credential, I'll create the credential. Take note, you select first secret text. The secret here corresponds to your access key. The ID will correspond to the same credential ID which you have in your pipeline, which is this ID, and then you can use the same ID as description. Once you have these basic configurations, you click on create credential. So this will create the Jenkins AWS secret key ID for the first credential. Now we also need the secret access key credential. So for us to create the secret access key credential, we click on add credentials. We see select text. Again, for us to get here, we click on add credentials, you click on select text, and then you come back to your pipeline. We are back on our pipeline. For the access key, you copy this, you copy and you paste back under the credential section. So I'll paste that as the secret. Take note, you copy your access key and your secret access key. They are secret information. That's why they are being pasted in the form which are encrypted, so you cannot see this. So you make sure you put your same secret key, and then for the ID, you put the same ID. So I'll put my ID here. I'll put the ID to match the ID for the secret access key. The first credential we had as per our pipeline was the access key. The second credential which you have is the secret access key. So once you put the secret access key as the second credential ID, you can put the same description here, and then you replace the secret with your actual secret access key. So I'll stop the recording and get my secret access key. Now once you get your secret access key, you can just right click here and you paste to correspond to your secret access key. To recap, you select text, you put the secret here is your secret access key. You put the ID Jenkins AWS secret access key, which corresponds to the ID which you have within your pipeline, and then you can use the same description. Once you do this, you click on create. Now once you're successfully created, you should have two new credentials, your AWS secret key and your AWS secret access key, which are created as credential, and they are both secret text. So once you have this information, you can come to your pipeline again. You come to your pipeline, you see the block of code that added the environment variable stage. As you save it, you can do a new build. So you click build now. Once you click on build, you just want to wait a few minutes for the build to complete. And now you will see our build completed because we've been able to pass the right environment variables with the right credentials. So if I come here, I'll click on console output. If I scroll down, I'll now see Terraform init successful, Terraform plan successful, because within my pipeline, I automatically gave the secret access key and the access key as credentials. So basically with this, you can set up credentials on your Jenkins server. Now while we have set up credentials, we'll come back to our pipeline. While we are here on managing our pipeline, we are going to create the next stages for our Jenkins. So we already have a stage for Git checkout. We have a tab for Terraform init. Now does Terraform init doesn't end as the second or as the only Terraform command which you run. So we need to create a stage to run the Terraform apply, because our Terraform plan works. So we need to create a stage for Terraform apply. Now when you click on your pipeline, you start by creating a stage. So we'll create a stage. So I'll give the name stage, I'll put my brackets, and then I'll do Terraform apply. Once I do that, I put a curly brace, I hit enter, I'll create the steps, and within the steps put the curly brace, I hit enter. Now the command which we'll be running is Terraform apply, and same like the one above, we just copy this. Since it's the same type of command, we'll copy this, we right click and we copy, and then we paste it here as the step. And rather than us having Terraform plan, so we just type Terraform apply. Now Terraform apply will enable us to automatically apply or provision the resources that are within our Terraform file. But now for us to do the addition without manually selecting yes or no, we are going to add a flag. We put 2 dots, then you add the flag auto approve. So once you do this, this will enable us to automatically deploy the application within our AWS account. So for us to do that, we click on apply. So once you do this, you click on save, and in our next module, we are going to build that stage and configure Slack integration with our entire pipeline.